Hello, everyone. Welcome back to X-Raised, where knowledge meets inspiration in the intricate dance of industry evolution. I'm your host, Miles, and today we're continuing a powerful conversation on leadership, which is one of those words we hear everywhere, every day, on stages, in boardrooms, in a lot of podcasts, even on motivational posters. But real leadership, that's a lifelong practice. It's not about just getting to the top. It's about sustaining excellence once you're there, mentoring others, and leaving a lasting impact. And our guest today knows this journey inside and out. With over 4 decades of experience guiding industries and professionals, he's built one of the most respected international education and certification providers in the world. His company, ACI Global and e-Quip, has been shaping leaders, strengthening organizations, and embedding responsibility and sustainability into the very DNA of businesses. Joining me today is none other than my co host, the Managing Director and CEO of ACI Global and eQuip, Ian Erskine. Hi!
Hi, Miles, and hi to all our viewers. And I hope you had a wonderful weekend, and I hope all our viewers did too.
Yes, as
And
always.
yes, it was a lovely weekend here. We had a bit of a respite from the wet weather, but the wet weather has set in again. But
Uh-huh.
as I say to everyone, I walked into church again, and it was one of the few times this month we've been able to walk in without an umbrella.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, I said hi to the fellow that hands out the math leaflets, and he said, "Oh, aren't you sick of the rain? So good not to see the rain." And I said, "Well, as an ex-farmer, no, I'm not. I love the rain, and it's so important." But yeah, and I had a lovely weekend, and yes, and I'm looking forward to this episode because it follows on from William McRaven's leadership lessons. And
Mm-hmm.
I hope all of you have had a chance to watch William McRaven's podcast, and because this literally follows directly from that in our leadership journey training.
Yes. So first, welcome back, Ian. Happy to have you here again. And as you said in our last episode together, we explored how to identify leadership potential and build it from the ground up. And today we're going deeper. How do you keep that leadership spark alive once it's lit and ensure it continues to grow and influence over time? So once a leader is established, Ian, how do you really ensure their development doesn't plateau but continues to expand their capability and influence?
Well, this is where we probably introduced this a little bit earlier than most other training providers would, because it involves getting really down into the core characteristics of the prospective leaders that come through our training programs. And this is where we introduce the Hogan Personality Inventory, HPI, and all our candidates do this little program, and basically it concentrates around 7 primary scales. Now, the first ones we look at are in reference to personal disciplines, and we talk about adjustment. That's the degree to which a person is calm and even tempered, or conversely moody and volatile. Okay.
Mhm.
Ambition, the degree to which a person seems to be a leader like or seeks status and values achievement. And the third one in this category is the interesting one, sociability, the degree to which a person appears talkative and socially self-confident. Now,
Mhm.
one of the questions that is posed on this one is quite interesting, because basically one of the questions is asked is, are you a party animal? Do you want to be the leader of the party all the time and things like that? And
Uh-huh.
I know I've done this 2 or 3 times, and I always say no. I don't like. I much rather sit back and enjoy other people's companies and things like that.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because uh, the profile, and it surprises a lot of people, because sometimes they come back to me and say, "That's not really me." And I said, "Well, okay, have you shown it to your wife or your partner?" And they say no. And I said, "How about you show it to them first and then come back and we'll have a discussion
Mhm.
as to how pertinent it is." And virtually every single occasion this happens, they go back to their wife or their partner, they run through it with them, and they say to them, "It definitely is you. That is you in a nutshell." And yes, so that's the first ones we do because, and again, this exercise is not a pass or fail
Mm-hmm.
because a perceived weakness, in actual fact, turned around, can actually become very rapidly a strength. Because what this does is forces people to do a strengths, opportunities, strengths and weaknesses and threats for
Mm-hmm.
themselves. Then they put this all together, and it's a tool where we take them over the 3-year period and keep revisiting it as we move through the professional development guarantee over that 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the next part of this we'll talk about a little bit later. I think when you raise your next question, but that's basically the first part of the primary scales we talk about.
Yeah.
Okay, and it gives you that sense of understanding of where we're trying to take or want to move our leaders in the direction to have the ability to mentor,
Mm-hmm.
have the ability to lead.
Mm-hmm.
And when we have a look a little bit later in the next question, we'll start to look at the interpersonal scales. And that's where the interesting couple of things which we actually encourage people to spend a bit of time on listening and hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. So mentoring and leading, it's good to be reminded of these practices because growth doesn't stop once you have a title. In fact, it's probably the point when the real learning begins. And of course, Ian, no one grows alone. Mentorship is often the difference maker. So, in your view, how should organizations design mentorship programs, as you said earlier, that produce leaders who are not just competent but truly visionary?
Yes, well, just heading off from where we were before, this is where we look at the interpersonal primary scales of a leader,
Uh-huh.
of people. And this is where we look at sensitivity, reflects the social skill, tact, and perceptiveness of a person. Now, when I talk about perceptiveness, this is where people having the ability not only to listen, but to be able to look and observe, because people's mannerisms tell you a lot of what they're thinking. And if you don't actively look and actively listen, you won't pick up what that person is trying to tell you. Often a person might be trying to not so much hoodwink you, but try to not answer the question and try to take you down a different path. That's where you have to be able to look, listen, and even at the point, turn around and ask a slightly more probing question to get them back onto the topic of which you're discussing, right?
Of
And
course.
again, that leads us off to where we look at prudence, concerns self-control and conscientiousness, right? And this is
Mm-hmm.
where we look to people when they come to work, they want to look to improve themselves. They're energetic to get straight into the job. They're energetic to step to put their hand up and say, yes, I'm happy to take on that task.
Mm-hmm.
That's being conscientiousness, shows conscientiousness, and the ability to want to keep moving forward and learning,
Yeah.
right? A very important part of the scales. And then the final one, no, there's two others, but the second last one is the ability to be inquisitive. Have the ability to ask that question. Don't ever be afraid not to ask that question. Even if you don't get the answer, and here I'll give you an example. I was doing a third-party audit on a construction site, and one of the biggest work meetings I had attended, actually, there's something like 500 people attended. And it started off on the wrong foot because basically the only people that were talking were the two senior managers of the construction site. And I thought, this is interesting. Anyway, part of the way through, someone stuck their hand up because at this stage, the two of them hadn't stopped talking. And the person stuck their hand up and said, look, we're having a bit of trouble with bins not being cleaned. I note that you've just said that you're very active in ensuring that all the worksite is kept clean and tidy and hygiene and everything like that is addressed. And but we can't get the bins emptied.
Mm.
Anyway, one of the two speakers literally snapped at the person and said, "That's none of our business. That's up to your company. They have to control that." And the person turned around, sat down, and I happened to be in earshot to him, and he said to his fellow next to him, he said, "Well, that's already last time ever we're going to ask a question here," and and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You have to, but you mustn't stop. So it was interesting. I took that question and then went back to speak to the company I spoke to, was actually auditing, and they said the same thing. And
Mhm.
I said, "Well, have you raised an opportunity for improvement or a corrective action?" And they said, "Yes, but it's never addressed." And I said, "Well, that's fine. It's out of my scope, but I'll put it into the report." And when it was put into the report, they then presented that report at the next meeting, and it shocked the people into doing something. So
Mhm.
this is again, but that's an example. Don't be afraid to ask the question,
Yeah.
because that demonstrates that, perhaps there's something more you can add to the
Right.
person that's actually doing the
Mhm.
presentation. Right? Now, the other thing to remember is we all need to have a learning approach. Okay. We always need to want to learn more, take on more. Now, I always find this a two-way street, because for the candidate, there's no reason why they shouldn't continue to stick their hand up and say, "Look, I want to take the next rung up the ladder, do some extra learning. Can you help me?" and so forth. And it's a little known law in most countries is that the organisation must ensure everyone working with the organisation have the learning capability to actually do their jobs. And as anyone would know, organisations are changing, so you have to be learning all the time. So that's the first part. Now, the second part is, and I find this the interesting one, often I will come against a situation where some of the senior executives want to try to hold on to their positions rather than allow someone else to come up and possibly even leapfrog them over to another position higher than them. So
Mhm.
what I do with people, I encourage them. No, if they want to move faster up the ladder than you within the organisation, let them do that. That's what you should encourage,
Uh-huh.
because that's when everything then comes out. The sensitivity, the prudence, the inquisitiveness, and this learning approach, sociability, all come out in the leadership scales within a person's ability to demonstrate their skills.
Yes.
So that's where the Hogan comes in and
Mhm.
follows on from the leadership lessons from McRaven, where the candidate is actively asked to actually present those lessons to the organisation, and quite often it's quite amazing that opens a lot of organisations' perceptions in reference to where their candidates, where their employees are going to end up. And
Mhm.
I have had people come back to me and said, having listened to that, having watched a podcast, having read the Hogan report on the candidate and or candidates, I now understand better how these people fit into the organisation. They fit better
Mhm.
into the organisation's mission and vision,
Yeah.
right? And there then comes this active working on understanding each other's values, your goals, your perceptions, and very much on your ideals in life.
Yeah.
And and again, one of the things, as I said earlier on, the ability to listen and also hear and see,
Mhm.
is quite often you see people wanting to learn from each other after they do these exercises.
Yes. And I love that. Mentorship as more than just an advice, but as a way of shaping the whole perspective to look and observe. And of course, those should involve active listening. I mean, being really intentional is very essential. And I'd
Yes,
like
yeah.
to spotlight what you mentioned, Ian. Don't ever be afraid to ask a question. And I guess that's why I've been doing this, because why not? It's a source of knowledge and it's how you can further really educate yourself. So, speaking of shaping, leaders influence culture every single day, often in ways they may not even realize. So, what strategies can help leaders consciously build a culture of continuous improvement and high ethical standards?
So this leads on very much from the first episode in reference to the leadership lessons and the Hogan.
Mhm.
And this is where senior leaders get to understand the core values of all the people that are working for them. And the trick here and the essential thing here is to ensure that the leadership team make sure that everyone that is working within the team are true to their core values.
Uh-huh.
So whatever they do, they must not be pushed out of that core value process, because if you start to get pushed away from what your core value in life is, that's when you start to make mistakes, right? So this is where your core values become oh so important, and one of the key strengths of the business for it to achieve its goals and continuous sustained success. But above all, to achieve sustained success, they must continue to gain traction,
Mhm.
right? And this is where it becomes quite dynamic and gives the whole culture of the organisation that a business the ability to become transformative leaders. Because whether we like it or not, the world is changing. Organisations need to change with it and adapt and to move with it. And yes, so this is where, as I said, core values is the key to that question. And that's
Mhm.
where we like to ensure that. And I know as a third party auditor, whenever I go in and I speak to people individually, I want to hear what their core values, what their core goals in life are.
Mm.
And I always ask the question, are you getting enough training? Most of the people that I deal with, yes, they're getting enough training. There is a few little things that constantly crop up, and that's one of the reasons why we've developed the skills mapping tool in e-Quip, whereas that's something where they often find that very difficult, where they can demonstrate and the records of their skills assessments are kept within the organisation, but they're not transferable.
Uh-huh.
Whereas they should, those skills verification assessments and that skills toolbox should be transferable, should be taken by the employee. And that's something that we've taken on board and developed a specific tool for that.
Hmm. Right. And that really hits home, Ian. Core values, which reflects the culture of the organization, which is in the small everyday actions. It's built in a thousand little moments leaders often don't realize they're shaping. And I think many of us can relate to how quickly a leader's habits, good or bad, ripple through a team. And now, culture is one thing, but the world outside an organization changes faster than ever, as you said. So, from technological shifts, to global challenges, how can leadership mapping evolve so it stays relevant and effective in unpredictable environments?
Well, well, this is where we take the candidates' strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats, and we view them every 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And quite often we find at the end of the 3-year CPD agreement, the Continual Professional Development Agreement, when they're ready to go to the next 3 years, we will look back over their progress, and quite often they will come back to me and they say, Ian, can we do the Hogan HPI again? Right? Because their circumstances have changed, and quite often the dramatic changes that I find are people that are having a family, they're increasing their family from 1 to 2, and that changes the perspective of the candidate or the employee quite enormously within the workplace, right? Because as their children grow up, there has to be a flexible enough environment for them not to be leaving their children behind.
Mhm.
And this is why I find it very, very important. And it's now becoming a little bit disappointing in some cases. I'm becoming a little bit shocked because people are now saying to me, they're saying to me with AI, how in many businesses there's employment beginning to increase at an alarming rate. And
Mhm.
what they're saying to me, and they've actually been asked a question
Yeah.
from their sons or their daughters, Dad, what do I need to do when I leave school to be able to take up a job like you're doing?
Mhm.
They're now having to say to their children, look, be very careful. You have to make sure you stay true to your core values. You have to stay true to your learning on an ongoing basis. You
Mhm.
have to stay true to being inquisitive, to be
Yeah.
able to ask the question, to be able to look and see and take in. Because, and again, this leads to me to a lovely instance where I did an organisation late last week,
Uh-huh.
and they're a special needs organisation. And so everyone that works there is under an assisted package where they're helped to ensure they're getting their work done and so forth. And I've now been doing them for nearly 9, 10 years. And
Wow.
it's wonderful to be greeted in there with the smiles, and they all come to me and want to tell me their
For
little
sure.
stories. Anyway, so I got out of the car, walked across, opened the door, and I was greeted by this lovely young man. He had a beaming smile on his face, and he said to me, "Welcome, Mr. Erskine. You're here to see Christina. I'm here to escort you in. We have to be happy." And he had this beaming smile,
Yeah.
and I said, "Good on you." And we shook hands. I signed in, went in and saw Christina, and he came back in and he said, "Look, can I join you as you go around?" And we said yes. And I complimented him on his manner, his happiness, and his smile. And
Yes.
I explained to him, I said, "You realise being able to smile is the easiest thing and works so well with your brain because your brain links into that smile and becomes very active. Whereas if you frown and you're unhappy, your brain sort of goes into reverse and won't
Yeah.
take anything in."
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, I always find it easy to smile." And I said,
Yeah.
"That's what we want you to continue to do."
Uh-huh.
And again, this is the perceptions that we must carry forth. But leading on, and that's where I said how things change. And yes, so it's an ongoing use of the Hogan tool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's an ongoing use of where leaders must be prepared to be observant.
Mm-hmm.
They must be able to, as I said, be able to actively see, and they have to be able to actively listen. And that's something else I spoke to this young man about
Yeah.
in reference to being open to listen to people to hear what they have to say.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually came back to me a little bit later and he said, "Look, if you may, when you come back next year, I'd like to spend a little bit of time with you because
Mm-hmm.
I would like to take on a job like you have." And I said, "You betcha." So I've got his name and everything and all recorded. And I'll look him up next year when I turn up at the audit. And yeah, but it was just lovely, big smile. And he said, "We're all happy today." And he
Yeah.
had this lovely grin on his face.
What a great story and encounter. And aside from quality, smile is contagious.
That's so true.
And
Yes.
those are just very important perspectives, Ian. I mean, you said SWOT analysis every 12 months and the HPI. And what a great bunch of lessons you shared with us. So thank you. I like that because in leadership, standing still is not safe. It's just a slower way of falling behind. So Let's now look ahead. If you had to narrow it down, Ian, what's the single most important step organizations can take today to make sure their leaders are ready for the world they'll face tomorrow?
I think this is the key the whole thing, and it ties it all in, and it's called annual or biannual appraisals, where
Okay.
you sit down with your leading manager or your senior manager, and you discuss how you're performing. But the critical part here is it needs to be a two-way street, what we call a 360-degree profile. So not only are you asking the questions, you're being prepared to have a question asked to you.
Mm-hmm.
And this makes it very much a valuable tool where, sometimes you can find you are having an issue with your senior manager. And I can go back to when I was with Elgas and AGL. I actually instigated the two-way or the 360-degree appraisal where the employee asked you a question, you asked the employee a question, and you both left with invigoration both for yourself and the employee. And you both left, wow, I've got a bit of work to do on that. And I take myself as an example because I clearly remember having a discussion with one of my supervisors. And it was one of the periods of time that I think we were in having a significant battle with our outside agents, which were suffering from drought and conditions like that, were having trouble paying their bills, and it really was affecting our bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Unbeknown to me, that was coming over in my personality. So I had the question asked to me, and the question was, Urko, I find sometimes when I ask you the question that I'm wanting to learn something, you're a little bit short with me. I know you're not doing intentionally, but I just wanted to let you know it's a little bit putting me off.
Mm-hmm.
And I took him to what he said, and then I explained what was going on. And I said, look, that's no excuse. I will work on that, of which I did. But that's the way the two-way
Yeah.
street, two-way 360-degree one-on-one
Mm-hmm.
can really work. But the appraisals on an annual or biannual basis every year, and those all add up over the 3-year CPD agreement of the candidate, so that at the end of the 3 years, they are basically a far better leader than they were when they first started.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very powerful way to wrap it up, Ian, through regular appraisal. And I agree with you. The exchange of knowledge, of questions are very critical as well. And it's about being ready for whatever walks through the door, preparing leaders with the resilience and adaptability to thrive no matter what comes. And what an incredible conversation again to end this series, Ian. If there's one thing we've learned today, well, a lot, it's that leadership is a journey that requires constant nurturing. It's like a pet, right?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very interesting. Just quickly, it's very interesting because often I hear people say that leaders are born, and some people will never be a leader and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I go the other way. I say within a person, there is always leadership capability,
Ah,
providing it is allowed to foster and generate.
yeah.
If you stifle within your workplace the ability to people to be able to step up, they won't become leaders. And
Mm-hmm.
ultimately, they'll leave your organization and go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. I mean, from avoiding plateaus to embedding values, from mentorship to adaptability, it's about preparing leaders, not just for today's challenges, but also for tomorrow's unknowns. I mean, there are a lot of
Exactly.
surprises along the way.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
thank you so much again, Ian, for sharing your wisdom with us. It's always a privilege to hear your perspective on how leadership can be shaped to create real, lasting change. It's a pleasure.
Yes. And once again, thank you for the listeners. And I look forward to having you back again next week. And
Yes.
we might have a little bit of a surprise next week.
I know, and I'm excited for that. Well, thank you again, Ian. Have a nice day. For our
You too.
audience, Thank you. For our audience, if you're looking to strengthen leadership within your organization or even within yourself, you can connect with Ian and his team at aciglobal.com.au or find him directly on LinkedIn. You're going to love it. They've got the programs, pathways, and principles to guide you on your leadership journey. Thanks again for being with me and Ian in this amazing journey, reminding you that leadership isn't about climbing the ladder alone. It's about making sure the ladder is steady enough for those who follow. Words of wisdom from me again. Until next time, catch us both in our next exciting episodes. This has been your host, Miles. Stay focused and inspired with X Raced.